lecture-based classes that were awful.
My public school, most of the studies there was just kind of memorize it, keep up with the rest of the class, you know.
I would say it was mostly memorization. We had a lot of AP classes in my school, and that was basically teaching for towards the textbook. So it was basically just memorizing textbook. There was really no critical thinking. The classes that I took senior year were all memorization.
I feel like in certain classes we definitely did some critical thinking skills. AP English was one of those, the higher level classes, but definitely that wasn't the main focus.
Was there a big focus on critical thinking?
I guess so.
Physics class.
Why?
Because my teacher was horrible. He just would hand us the book and tell us to learn. Straight memorization.
Foreign language could have been much better.
What did they focus on mostly?
Well, not speaking, for sure. Definitely a lot more on memorization of, which, I mean, how do you learn a language without, memorization? But they focus a lot more on memorization and vocab words than
learning to speak.
On learning to speak. And I wish that the speaking skills had been a little bit better.
I didn't have many choices in classes. There weren't cool classes. I couldn't take psychology or philosophy. I've heard some high schools offer that. I just took the basic math, English, science, history. It was kind of boring.
High school was mostly a great high school, but the science program, even though I wasn't involved in sciences, so it did not affect me that much, were kind of lacking. We had a lot of even though professors in the rest of the school, for the most part, had master's degrees, or even a lot of them had PhDs in the science program, there was a lot of incompetent teachers who honestly did not focus very much on how to teach science properly. They just assumed we knew everything.
Workload, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because we had a lot of really challenging work, which was really interesting, intellectually and stuff, but it also took a lot of time, so there wasn't much else to do other than academics.
Did you go to a public school or a private school?
I went to a private school.
And how do you think a private school differs from a public school in terms of teaching?
I think there are some really good public schools out there. The ones in my district that I would have had to go to were really underfunded, and so class sizes were really large. And I think teachers, because of that, had to compromise one-on-one student interaction, whereas at my school, most of my classes were 10 to 15 students, and I babysat for my teachers, and I knew them all on a first-name basis, and they came to everything. And so I think that's kind of a difference. You get to interact with your students more, I think.
Okay.
I would change trying to expand on how education can apply to the real world and not just in the classroom.
I wish I could have been offered more classes so I could have, when I came here, I feel people had more opportunities in their high school than I did, internships and stuff, and we didn't do that, so.
One of the classes I took was chorus, and I was always annoyed by how little we were funded.
A bit, within academic guidelines. I feel there was no come up with your own idea and we'll talk about it or anything like that.
Not really emphasized, I would say. There wasn't really much of it, so I would assume no.
Oh boy. I really don't like standardized tests.
I'm a very poor standardized tester.
So
But I did very well in the class itself. I got A's in my AP classes, and they were very challenging.
I took the ACT, and I don't think it was an accurate judge of my intelligence because it's a time test, and I think that people focus more on rushing and getting the test done rather than on what they know. Also, I think that the questions that are asked aren't exactly a good judge of what students know.
There's more than just knowledge in general. you have to be able to apply it in real world situations, and taking a standardized test is just kind of a book smart test.
Definitely not. I feel like because there was a time limit, it made it a lot harder to really get your ideas that you wanted to share. I know I'm much better in discussions than like writing and I think the tests, because it was supposed to be very specific information that you were supposed to know for the test, I often would forget that one piece of information, but I'd have a whole body of knowledge about something else. So, like, they weren't exactly geared towards me, I felt.
And as far as the SAT, I would say it's a good measure of how well you can take tests, because I can take tests pretty well, and I did okay. But other kids that are smarter than me, who I interacted with them in class, and wow, that person's really smart, they maybe didn't do that. I know they didn't do quite as well as me, even though they were just as smart or smarter, because they weren't quite as good as at logical test taking.
I remember I had more issues with this one, the abbreviated the SRI. It was identical every single year you took it, so if you, I believe I had most of the questions memorized.
For SAT and ACT, I don't think it showed because I didn't do very well on them. I didn't do awful, but I feel like I am a lot smarter than it was reflected.
Not at all. I'm not a good test taker at all. Never been, will never be. I'm more of a presentation project kind of person.
I'm honestly very, very critical of standardized testing, and honestly, with SAT scores, I realized that, people from my high school often succeed a lot in college because they were taught how to think so well on their own, and a lot of times, my friends from high school and I were getting better grades than people who did way better than us on SATs and other standardized tests, when you compare scores. So I think, if anything, my experience at my high school shows how, unimportant standardized tests are and how little they actually predict.
I think off the top of my head, the thing that challenged me the most is managing my time, because in high school we had 8 classes, but they're 8 relatively easier classes, so I just had a little bit of busy work, nothing huge. And here we have a fraction of the amount of hours spent in class, but we're expected to spend a much longer period of time outside of class working on homework that isn't always specific, such as reviewing for tests, going over readings that sometimes a teacher doesn't correct or look at. So it's harder to get myself motivated to do stuff that I think won't be graded right as soon as class starts.
We didn't have the electives that a lot of other people had. Basically, there wasn't a lot of hands-on stuff. Because we're a charter school, we just don't have the funding to.
Hi, my name's Brianna Tarpey, and I am from Lafayette, California. For high school, I went to a public high school. Experience there was very good. However, I found that throughout my years, there are just a few problems with our education system. One of them being budget cuts, but the second being that my school mainly focused on standardized tests, and how most of my teachers, including a lot of my AP teachers, just taught to the test instead of actually teaching the subject.
Hi, my name's Julia Hart. I attended a private school in Columbus, Ohio. Overall, it was an excellent school, and I was very privileged to attend. However, I was disappointed by some of the apathy I encountered in some of my classmates. Many of them did take advantage of the educational opportunities that they were provided with, but many of them also did not take an active interest in their education. And I think that's a widespread problem among high schools today, is that students simply aren't being engaged, and they are not feeling that they have ownership over their education.
I'm Peter Sink. I went to a large public high school in Tennessee and had an okay experience there. The school was kind of divided in half between the honors classes and the standard classes. For the honors classes, almost everyone went to college, but for standard, it was not as many, and mostly community colleges. And for the people in standard, it was the focus of the administrators was really to see who they can make pass the state standardized tests, because there's a lot of pressures on schools to pass those, to secure your funding, to be show adequate yearly progress. So that was a big thing that weren't really focusing on critical thinking.
We made this documentary to bring light the issues that we see with the educational system. This project was focused on a book called The Global Achievement Gap by Tony Wagner, and within that book he talked about a bunch of different problems within our educational policy and with our educational system.
I think this project is really about raising awareness about some of the issues that are prevalent in the education system today.
And you have to keep in mind for our documentary, it was kids that go to the College of Worcester, so they definitely did do okay, at least in high school. And we did find a lot of the kids we interviewed went to private or charter schools.
I feel like a lot of people don't think there's a problem with our educational system. Kids today feed right into college if they have enough AP scores or if they get good SATs, but they're not actually learning anything.
The most important message is really that it's important to be aware of what is actually going on in the classroom.
Types of jobs available to people are changing, and more global competition is happening, and more things are either being outsourced or done by machine now. So we need knowledge workers that have critical thinking and teamwork skills. That's what I'd want people to gain from the documentary.
Teachers need to teach what Wagner considers the 7 critical skills. 2 of the most important, which we focused on, are critical thinking and problem solving and analysis. Kids today need to be able to sit back and be able to look at a problem, understand its origins and what the problem exactly is and what they can do to fix it.
I think this is more of a systemic problem. Everyone needs to work together and cooperate if the school system is to be improved.
The book also shows how through these high stakes testing, like No Child Left Behind, the schools and administrators are going to just focus on passing. They're going to do what they need to get the incentive, which does not correlate to the skills students need.
I would like to see a school system where internships are made important, as well as projects where you work with teachers and other students, and at the end, instead of having grades, you sort of present your project and present your work, and that way you make sure that whatever the students are learning, they can apply it to everyday life.
It's important to be able to think critically in the everyday world, and that is just something that is not being taught to a lot of students today.
I would like to see change in America. I would definitely like to see the No Child Left Behind change. I would like to see states no longer putting so much emphasis on their statewide standardized tests.
I feel today that educators and administrators can make a difference by petitioning their state and by bringing all these problems up at a district level in order to change how curriculum is run and how money is placed in different areas and how each school focuses on standardized testing.
Every single teacher can make a difference and can ensure that students are learning to think and that students are being engaged in the classroom.
Funding should be more even so the lower class areas can compete and keep their kids interested.
I've learned so much from this experience, just about some of the problems prevalent in the American school system, and I hope that this documentary provides some of that knowledge to a wider audience, because we've really gained, I think, a lot of insights about what can be done to improve the schools today.
Hope you guys enjoyed the documentary, and thanks for watching.